All right, welcome to Ever Onward. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today we have a special guest. I'm here with Caitlyn Ludlow. And I met Caitlyn at our Faith Summit this past fall. And she's just darling and wonderful to talk to. And she wanted to share her perspective and her experiences with missionary work. So, welcome, Caitlyn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm
Oh,
excited to be here.
oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, tell me about how you decided to serve a mission.
I actually didn't think I was going to serve a mission when I was younger, but as I got older, it kind of just kept coming into my mind of, oh, you should serve, you should serve. And I didn't have any strong impressions or strong feelings about it, but as it got closer to being able to go on a mission, there wasn't anything else going on. And when I graduated high school, I made a bet with myself that if I wasn't married before I could go on a mission, then I would just go on a mission. So I didn't get married and it felt right. So I just started the papers and just went from there.
That's awesome. Did you have any worries or concerns, or did you feel pretty confident going into it?
Yeah, I was a little nervous about it just because there's no way to 100% prepare for a mission until you go. And so I definitely had reservations about how I was going to be as a missionary, and what the experience was going to be like. But overall, I thought that it was going to be a positive experience. And everyone always told me, like, oh, you'll be a great missionary. You're so outgoing and you teach really well and you'll have a great time. So that helped me at ease. But in the end, it kind of made it a little bit more difficult because of how my experience ended up happening. But
Yeah. So yeah, let's jump into that. Tell us a little bit about where you went and what that experience was like for you.
yes, so I was called to serve in the Uruguay mission, um, and I left in May of 2017. I went to the Colombian MTC, and I was there for 6 weeks, and then I served in Uruguay for 2 weeks, and then I came home.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
was it was not it was not what I was expecting. It was not what I was planning. It was not what I was wanting. Um, but it happened, and the MTC was great. I loved the MTC. I loved the group that I was in. I loved my companion that I was with. I loved our MTC president and his wife. It was a really great experience, and it was hard at first. I think for everyone, especially because I didn't go to the Provo MTC like my brother did, for example. He was there when he was preparing for his mission. I flew out to a different country, and I was nervous for the culture shock, but thankfully the culture shock didn't hit me that hard. Um, and I was doing good up until we had our first P day and I got to see everyone's emails and I was doing okay. I was a little teary-eyed, but I was fine. And then I got my dad's email and I just lost it. I was sobbing and I was crying so hard. People thought that like a family member had passed away because I
Oh.
was just sobbing. And I think it was just, I was holding myself together for almost a whole week at that point. I was holding my emotions together. I hadn't cried since I left the airport when I said goodbye to my family. So I think it was mainly just that was finally what opened up the door for all of my emotions to just come out. But it was good. He was just talking about how proud he was of me and how excited he was for me to have this experience and how great of a missionary I was going to be. And I have a very tender spot in my heart for my dad. So, of course, when I got his email, it just opened up the waterworks. But
Yeah.
it was good. It was a really great experience. I learned a lot while there, and it was exciting because we could go out and serve in Colombia where we were with some of the missionaries that were serving there. And yeah, overall, a really great experience. I loved the MTC. And what was interesting was as I was going through the MTC, as I got closer to being able to go out into the mission field, I started to have some hesitancy about mental health specifically because I've dealt with mental health issues on and off since about middle school. And so it's not been a constant thing of I always have dealt with this, I've always struggled with this. It's kind of gone in waves as life's gone on. Um, and when I was preparing for my mission, that was one of the hesitancies was how I was going to do while on the mission with that. And I just kept telling myself like it'll be okay. I haven't really struggled with that for a couple years now, so I think I'll be okay. It'll all work out. Like, if you just focus on the work, then God will take care of the rest and you'll be okay. But as the MTC went on, it kind of started coming back into my mind. Not necessarily that I was struggling with mental health, like anxiety or depression, but I just was really nervous about it and nervous about struggling with it. Um, and so I didn't do much. It just was a back of the mind thought, right?
Yeah.
And then I get into the mission field, and that's when it like hit me like a ton of bricks. And that's when things really just started to go down south. Like I said at the beginning, I'd only served for 2 weeks out in the field, but it felt like 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, just because each day mentally was so long. Um, I'm trying to remember. The first couple days were okay. I think mentally, I was just trying to tell myself, like, it's going to be a lot, but just keep yourself busy and it'll be fine. And I loved my trainer. She was really great. She was actually either the only English speaking trainer or one of the two English speaking trainers that was in the whole group of us coming in. Everyone else was native Spanish speaking, which
Wow.
at first I was a little bit bummed because I wanted a native Spanish speaker because that really helps to immerse yourself into the language and it forces you even more to have to speak the language, which I wanted to do. But it ended up being a really big blessing because as things progressed and as time went on, I was able to talk to her more openly and easily to be able to explain what was going on versus having to figure out how to translate what I was feeling. So it ended up being a blessing, but she was amazing. She was really great, but she was one of those trainers of let's just go guns a-blazing, 120%, which I wanted. I wanted to do that because I was nervous of having, what they call what's it called? A trunky trainer or
Oh,
something like
yeah.
that, where they
Hmm.
just want to go home and aren't really motivated to do work. So I was really happy with how it all worked out and I was really excited. And the first couple days, I was okay. Um, just trying to keep myself busy and not think about it. But as the days went on, it just kept coming back into my mind. And I don't even know what it was, but after a couple days, things started to become overwhelming. Um, I'm trying to remember some examples. Like, for example, one of the days she said that I would be in charge of the phone for the day. So if anyone texted or if anyone called, I would respond and I would answer. And I like shut down from that because for whatever reason. And it's so funny saying that now because where I'm at now, that doesn't sound like a problem at all. But for whatever reason, in that moment, that just totally took me out. And I could not remove myself from the big picture and focus on the little things. I just kept seeing everything as the big picture, and that was really overwhelming. Um, just things like, how am I going to be able to know where I'm going without a map? Or I don't know what street I am. I don't know how to get home. Like, or I don't know how to lead a discussion. I don't know all of these things. And logically, I knew I would figure it out as I went, and I knew that the Lord would fill in the gaps, but I could not get past that hurdle. And thinking about it, how am I going to do this for 18 months was even more overwhelming. And, they tried to comfort me by saying, just get to the first transfer, which is typically 6 weeks, and that seemed so overwhelming. So like, okay, just get through the first month. That was so overwhelming. Okay, first week, so overwhelming. Get through the day, so overwhelming. Can you get through this hour? And barely I could get through. And it just everything seemed so overwhelming, so daunting, and I just could not get over those hurdles, and I still don't know why. It was really frustrating. It was very frustrating, but um eventually it just kind of got to the point where I wasn't really able to do anything and it was no longer safe for me to be out there. Um and so that's why he ended up having me come home.
Yeah. I appreciate you being willing to share this story because I think so often we talk about the roses of missionary work, but few
Mhm.
people are willing to talk about the thorns. And there's
Yes.
both roses and thorns. And
Hmm.
sometimes because we only talk about the roses, we prepare a lot of these missionaries that are going out that think it's going to be awesome and amazing and it will be, but it's also going to be really, really hard.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes we're not prepared for that. And if we don't expect it to be hard, then it hits us even
Even
harder.
harder. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can understand why people do that because I tend to do that myself of, oh, just focus on the positive. And there is some truth to that where if you focus on the positive, you see the positive. But when they only talk about the positive and don't talk about the negative because they're scared talking about the negative will make people not want to go or not want to do it or, they're thinking about it, so it'll make it worse. I don't know. It's a tricky situation and it's a delicate scenario that you kind of have to play person to person. But when you only hear good things about it and then you go out and you don't have that same positive experience, which I still really loved my mission. I'm still so grateful that I went and that I had the good experiences that I did, but it definitely was not the same as what everyone else was talking about. And so I kind of had like on both ends where you either had the people that hated their missions, they did not enjoy it, they did not have a good time and are now inactive because of it or whatever. They just did not have a positive experience, or you had the ones that loved it, best 2 years of their life, wish they could be back. I didn't really have anyone say the middle ground, and I feel like that's kind of where I'm more at. Like I still really loved my mission. I had a positive experience, but it was a very hard experience and it's taken time to have it be a positive experience. I've had to work a lot to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to go back and touch on something you said. Here at the Missionary Wellness Center, we work with a lot of return missionaries and whether they've returned early or served the whole 2 years.
Mhm.
And there's this principle that keeps being brought up. And it is a true principle that like the Lord will make weak things become strong, or that you said like the Lord will fill in the gaps.
Mhm.
And while that's a true principle, it's hard because sometimes those things don't look like what we think they're going to look like. So sometimes we're like, okay, I'm going to go on this mission and the Lord will fill in the gaps and he'll make weak things become strong, which means I'm going to make it the whole 2 years. I'm going to overcome every obstacle. Nothing is going to stop me. But then, like you said, looking at the long game, maybe you could speak to how Heavenly Father has made weak things become strong and how maybe what his version of the everything will be okay is different than maybe what you thought okay might look like. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes total sense because that's exactly what happened for me. Because when you're going into a situation like serving a mission, you have an idea of what it's going to look like. And that's what was really hard for me when I came home because it was not what I expected it to look like. And I really struggled with that for a long time. I came home and I was so angry. I was angry and hurt with God because I would in my prayers just kind of fuss at him and say, I put schooling on hold. I put my life on hold. I tried all these things. I did my very best and it still wasn't good enough. I still came home early. Why did I come home early? Why is this happening to me? Why, everyone was telling me that I was going to be such a great missionary because I'm outgoing and I can teach really well and I speak well with other people and other people that I thought that they would struggle on their missions, they're thriving. Like why am I struggling? Why am I having to go through this experience? And it's hard when you're in that situation because you don't know why always at first. And I was hoping that, like I said earlier, God would fill in the gaps how I wanted them to be filled in. But what ended up happening was he did fill in the gaps. They weren't the gaps that I was thinking of, and they weren't in those timelines that I was thinking of. Um, but I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. Um, and I really do believe that everything works out as long as you stay faithful and as long as you trust in the Lord. Because I don't know if I would be where I'm at in my life without having that experience. And um, it was actually really helpful because my younger sister, she went and served a mission and she ended up coming home early as well. And I think I think that was helpful in a few different ways. I think overall it was really helpful that she had me to sort of confide in and to go to for comfort. I could say, I know exactly what you're feeling. I know what this is like. I've been there before. But I think it also helped. We joke about it now, but I was the guinea pig for my parents and how to handle someone coming home early because um, my parents are great. I love them dearly and they did the best they could, but it was not the most helpful of how they handled it um, when I came home. And it's interesting because now it's been 7 years, so things aren't nearly as clear as they were when they first happened. But my mom, she was just so desperate to do anything to keep me out on the mission field. And she was even willing to hop on a plane to come and bring me some antidepressants. Because that was something else that was hard, was when I was in the field, because it was such a small town, it would have taken a week or two to see a doctor, and then another week or two to get the medication that was prescribed, and then it was going to take another 3 to 6 weeks for the medicine to really kick in and to notice a difference. And so I would sit there in my brain, you expect me to stay like this where I'm at for 6 weeks at least? I'm not going to make it 6 weeks. That's not going to work out. And so my mom, she was saying that she'll come down, she'll fly down and bring medicine with her. And I was like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to work out. And um, my dad, I've always been close with my dad, especially as I've gotten older, and I'm still very close with him, but he's never really struggled with mental health issues. And so when I came home, he told me, this was a little bit later, but when I came home, he was expecting me to just be visibly broken, right? Like just so visibly depressed, so visibly hurting and struggling. And I came home and I was smiling and I was excited to see everyone. And so there was confusion on their end because they were like, "Oh, this doesn't look like someone who's depressed." You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, and I kind of had to explain to them, like, I'm able to put on a show, essentially. Like, I'm able to present myself like everything's okay, but it's a mess in here. And the first couple days I did come home, I was feeling a little bit better. I was feeling more comforted because I was back at home. I was with my family. And I was kind of hoping that by being home, all of my problems would go away. They would just
Yeah.
disappear. And they didn't. I felt okay the first couple days and then it just came right back. I was still really struggling with depression and anxiety. And um, what was really hurtful was, I want to say it was about a week after I came home, we did our annual camping trip up to Island Park in Yellowstone. And I was on a walk with my dad, and we were talking about the mission. And he, in the middle of the conversation, I can't remember how it got brought up, but he said, it kind of seems like you just gave up and quit and you just wanted to come home. So you just quit. And that was a big dagger. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, and I understand that it's from confusion on his end, and he's never struggled with depression or anxiety, so it's hard for someone who's never gone through it to understand what it's like, especially when it's not a visible thing. Um, but that was really hard to hear because I value my dad's word a lot. I have a bit of perfectionism in me, and I'm always looking for approval of others. And my dad was a really big one that I saw approval of, especially as I got into my later teen years. And so to hear him say that, it felt like I was such a big disappointment to him. It felt like I failed him. It felt like he looked at me differently. He thought that I thought that he didn't not love me the same way, but just didn't see me the same way as before. And that was really, really hurtful. And he's apologized since. He's way more understanding now, and we joke about it now, but it
Yeah.
was it was really hard in the moment, especially because it was so fresh and I was still struggling with it. To have him say that in that moment was really crushing. But it was helpful because I could give my parents some tips on how to handle the situation with my sister coming home early, and they did great. Everyone was really supportive. And my parents were supportive too. They did everything they could to help me get the help that I needed and to help me get better. Um, but it's just little things here and there that are little jabs.
Yeah.
Um, and thankfully, overall, I think I had a very good support system. You, of course, have the ones that are a little judgy, but I'm so grateful for the bishop that I had at the time. He was amazing. He was so, so loving and so understanding. I met with him weekly for a while just so he could check in on me and see how I was doing, which was really helpful because my stake president was great as well, but um, he he said some things as well that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Um, and I can understand why some people do end up leaving the church from the experiences they've had after they've come home early from the mission, because I believe everyone has good intentions and they don't intend to be rude and hurtful, but some of the things they do say end up coming across that way. And um, so anyway, I had a really great support system. The ward was really understanding and kind and supportive. My bishop was great. Um, the stake president overall was great as well. But I can understand how it's really hard for those who don't have that same support system when they come home because it's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
enough as it is to come home and try to work through everything, and even sometimes now, if I think about it long enough, I'll still think, what if? But
Hmm.
that was a big question for a while of, what if I did this differently? What if I did this? What if this happened? What if I tried this? Like, would that have been different? Um, and I just kind of have to remind myself that that's not great thinking, especially if you let it spiral down, because then I would just get upset at myself and say, well, you didn't try hard enough. You did just quit. You didn't do everything that you could have. You didn't try every little thing on the planet that you could, and
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It
It's
is a lot.
a
And
lot.
I agree with you. I think almost everyone has great intentions, and I think that they never set out to hurt or offend or to judge, but because we don't talk about things like this very often, there's a huge learning curve for everyone involved, and
Mhm.
no one really knows what to do when this happens.
Yes.
Like my son came home early too, and I had that same thing. I thought, where do I go for resources? Who do I turn to? Who can I talk to? And it was really hard to figure out what my options were and like where to find the resources because it's not talked about, which is why I came across the Missionary Wellness Center and love what we do because we can talk
Yeah.
about stuff like that and we can help the learning curve and we can be that resource for people who are like, I don't know how to handle this.
Yep.
My next question for you is kind of a personal one, so hopefully that's okay. But you're right. A lot of missionaries who come home early leave the church, and I think that there's a lot of hurt. And I think you even mentioned it that like sometimes when you come home, you might be a little angry with God or like confused with your relationship with God because sometimes you're like, I feel like you told me to go.
Hmm.
Why would you have told me to go if I was going to come home? And there's just so much there. So maybe you could share some insight or advice. How did you keep your testimony and how did you find your way back to God after this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It takes time. I would say don't rush it because everything does happen for a reason. And it was so frustrating coming home early, especially when that's not what you want to do, especially where in Utah it is a little bit more of a more judgy side of people. Um, it was very anxiety inducing being home afterwards, especially like going on dates, for example. That was really hard because when you're in that age group, everyone is talking about missions if they're also in the church. And so if you're going on a date with another member, that always comes up, of, oh, did you serve a mission? Yeah, I did. Did you? Yeah, I did. And I wouldn't flat out say I came home early for mental health issues. I would say, yeah, I served because I did serve. I did serve a
Hmm.
mission. Um, and, the more questions that they would ask, I would answer honestly. Um, but you could see as it goes on that they're figuring things out and they're putting everything together. They're like, oh, you came home early. I'm like, yes, I did. And that was always so uncomfortable to say because at that time I was still ashamed of it. I didn't like to talk about it because I felt like a failure with it, and I was scared that other people were going to view me as a failure from coming home early. And so it just takes time. Um, and ultimately, what helped me stay in the church was focusing on my relationship with God specifically and not focusing on the ward members or um, the church itself, but focusing on my personal relationship with Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ and leaning on Jesus Christ with his atonement and just reminding myself that God and Jesus Christ know exactly what I'm going through and they're hurting with me. Um, and reminding myself that I'm not alone in it, even though I felt alone. I felt so alone.
Yeah.
Um, but just having to be consciously aware that I wasn't and that everything does work out in the end. This is just a small time of my life. It doesn't define me. It doesn't keep me from being able to go to the celestial kingdom by not serving a full 18-month mission, and that there are, other things to look forward to in life. And that was something that my dad did say was, I have no doubt you would have had a great missionary experience. I have no doubt that you would have learned a lot of great things and that you would have had a great life afterwards. But I have no doubt that you can do the same thing even now. It's just going to look different. You'll still have great experiences. You'll still have a wonderful life. It will just look different. And that's okay. It's completely okay if it ends up being different as long as you're focusing on what's really important, which is, for me anyway, my relationship with Heavenly Father and trusting in Him and trying to be like Jesus Christ. And the best way that I felt his love and I felt his presence was by going to the temple, actually. Um, I was able to be an ordnance worker before I left for work for the mission field and when I came home. And I really think that was very helpful for me to stay firm in my testimony, um, and to stay active in the church because I was able to be in the house of the Lord. I was able to feel his presence. I was able to leave all of the outside noise, all of my jumbled thoughts that were racing a million miles an hour. I could leave it at the door of the temple and I could walk in and I could just feel peace and I could feel love and I could feel calm and stillness. And that was very helpful for me. I still, just this year, actually started going to the temple regularly again. Um, and it's been such a big blessing in the same way. It's a safe place for me, for sure.
Oh, I love that so much. That was such a great answer.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one last question for you, and then I'm gonna let you off the hook. But I always end with like asking what advice you would like to give. You know, a lot of our listeners are parents of missionaries that are preparing to go, and a lot of missionaries that are preparing to go. So I have
Okay.
kind of a two-part question. One is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to serve a mission, but knows that they do struggle with mental health and how to navigate the fears of do I go or do I not go?
Hmm.
And for anyone who has come home early for mental health, what advice would you give them to help them find the peace that you've been able to find?
Yeah, so for those who want to serve but are nervous about how it's going to go down because of mental health issues, I 100% understand you. I was you. I felt that same thing. And I think if I thought about it long enough, that might have been enough to hold me back and to not go. But I would say if you want to serve, if you feel peace about that, then you should do it. And just start the process. Just start working on your papers. And if something feels off, you can hold off for a little bit and pray about it and figure out if that is still the right move. And then just go to the next step and kind of have, I don't know if realistic is the right word, but just kind of have an expectation of I very well could come home early. It very well could be too much for me. It very well could be not the right move, and I could end up coming home early, and that's okay. I tried. I did my best. I gave it what I could, and that's enough for God. That's enough. Um, and that I still have to remind myself that if I try, it's enough, and that's all God asks me. Um, and then just keep a close relationship with Jesus Christ through this whole process because even if you are struggling and if you do feel alone, he is right there with you and he knows exactly how you're feeling. And don't be afraid to be honest with those around you, your parents, um, your companion, if you do go end up serving. Be very open and honest with your mission president, and they are more than willing to help you. I'm really happy with the resources that the church does have now. I feel like it's a great tool for missionaries to use, and I hope everyone is able to figure out how to use it because I wish I had that
Yeah.
when I was serving. But it's going to be okay. Regardless if you serve or if you don't serve, regardless if you do serve and you come home early, it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. There's so many other good things about it. Like now I'm married to a wonderful man. We've been married 5 years and we have two beautiful children. And it's the biggest blessing and joy that I could have ever imagined. And it's not the end. And for those who do come home early, it's hard. It's really hard. And I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that's able to take away the pain and make it painless to come home early, but the resources that are available, like the mental health center, is a great tool. And there's so many people who do love you. There's so many people who are willing and able to support you in whatever way. and there's angels on the other side that are carrying you through. There were angels on the other side carrying me through and still carrying me through. And it's going to be okay. You're strong enough to get through it.
Oh, that's such a beautiful message. And I really felt it in my heart as you were speaking. And I know that those who listen to this will be able to be blessed by you coming on and sharing this. I'm just so appreciative of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to share.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and we will have more coming out soon. So stay tuned, and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. As a nonprofit organization, we are able to provide this information for free through donations and generous support to our cause. So if you would like to learn more or would like to get involved, please visit our website, missionarywellnesscenter.org. We'll catch you next week.